Good morning, Year 12. Welcome back to our lesson 16. Okay, we are still under our umbrella topic of gender now, looking to establish that knowledge and understanding of concepts relating to gender. Okay, so just as a recap or a starting activity, this isn't a misprint. I've taken off some of the information. I'm just going to say press pause in a minute and give yourself only maybe about 2-3 minutes to write down as much as you can remember. So under any of these headings, anything that you can remember, okay, in the next, and just give yourself a couple of minutes to see what you're remembering from yesterday's lesson using our key headings. So who is this person? When were they working? What were they doing? Or what did they contribute? How? Can you think of any illustration examples and any point of challenge or evaluation? So press pause and fill in now. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through the answers. The reason it's not on the screen this time is sometimes you might just cheat, skip the screen forward and not actually do the activity. So by telling you verbally what the answers are, you're going to have to at least write them down. So who is she? Well, I'll tell you who she's not. We started this week with Robin Lakoff. So this is not Robin Lakoff. This is Marjorie Goodwin. Now, as I'm talking to you guys, I'm going to be making links back to Robin Lakoff because actually when we get to the challenge over here in a minute, you can always look comparatively. So when we're challenging theorists, we can always look at them compared to other theorists. So this theorist challenges that theorist, okay? So when was Marjorie Goodwin working? She was working in the 1980s. So we had Lakoff working in the 70s, or at least publishing her seminal work in the 70s, Women in Women's Language in the Workplace. And here we've got Marjorie Goodwin working in the 80s. So again, we will see an awful lot of our theorists are kind of clustered around the end of the 70s and through the 80s. That was when there seemed to be a huge kind of focus, a scientific linguistic focus, a social focus on the relationship between language and gender, because gender and the changing social dynamics of gender was such a kind of resonant topic of that time. Okay, it was the continuation of change instigated by the 60s. So through the 70s, we saw this huge redefinition, this tension as genders were looking to define themselves, to secure a sense of gender identity in a shifting kind of cultural landscape. Through the waves of feminism and the cultural shift post-war, there was this huge upsurgence of kind of thinking about the role of women, redefining women, looking at the ways that women had been poorly represented within society and how we could change that. So that wave of kind of social and cultural change naturally then creates a ripple effect, an impact on what scientists are looking at, researchers are looking at, etc. So 1980s for Marjorie Goodwin, 1970s for Robin Lakoff. So what did Marjorie Goodwin contribute? Okay, good. So we zoomed right in on one area for Marjorie Goodwin, although she does contribute others. And we're going to use Marjorie Goodwin to illustrate directives, mitigated and aggravated directives. But what she also contributed, because actually she was an anthropologist more than a linguist, so she was interested in people, relational elements, friendship groups, socialization, anthropology, the study of people and how they relate. Okay, so she saw that part of the relationships between people was achieved, manipulated, maneuvered, negotiated through their language choice. So the reason she trips up or turns up in our language A level is because although she was primarily an anthropologist, she saw the correlation between language, words, conversations, and how people socialized and organized themselves at a social level. Okay, so she gives us aggravated and mitigated directives. Robin Lakoff gave us, if you remember that list, key kind of linguistic features that she observed in the behavior of women, and an understanding through her interpretation that women were operating out of a place of deficit, that women were coming to the linguistic table, the kind of the social table, so to speak, at a deficit, already set up with aspects of their behavior that might mean they would fail or have shortcomings when compared to men. Marjorie Goodwin, though, mitigated and aggravated directives. So Marjorie Goodwin, now we are going to look at this how again, because I left you yesterday with quite a complicated methodology to look at. And just because of timing, we didn't really have time to unpack it together. So we are going to zoom in on that how again. But if we were already picking up on a few things through field work, okay, through observation of children at play, Lakoff observed women in the workplace, okay. There were some of Lakoff's findings that actually overlap here because she did talk about the behavior of children and how children up until a certain age would have spoken the language that they would have learnt under the direction and the teaching kind of their mother. But she noted that by the age of 10, this is Robin Lakoff, that by the age of 10, boys had unlearned that language. In other words, once children went to the school environment and were socializing and playing differently than what they might experience at home, their language changed. Now, actually, that creates an overlap with Marjorie Goodwin, this idea that actually watching children socialize, watching children at play in their peer groups, you see interesting behaviors, how they use language to socialize, to determine whether you're in or you're out. So Marjorie Goodwin used fieldwork, Lakoff used fieldwork, observation. So they both had a similar kind of approach. Let's watch people using language, but in very different contexts. Okay, so illustrated examples. Can you remember what the doctor said? What did the Kurt, who we thought might be the male doctor, say? Take off your shoes, lie down. What about the female? Okay, well, let's think about what dose we're going to keep you on. So we are going to look again at what aggravated and mitigated directives really mean today. But we'd already used the starter yesterday to get a sense of mitigated and aggravated directives. Okay, so that's what we want. We want illustrated examples that we can learn. Take off your shoes, but that we can label. Take off your shoes is an aggravated directive. It begins with the imperative. Okay, it doesn't use any modals. Let us take a look at what we're going to do, uses inclusive pronouns, uses inclusive verb forms, so we can linguistically label an illustrated example, cha-ching, all the way to the high grade bank. Okay, now challenge. Now we've seen some of these elements in the social theories as well. So when you start to evaluate theory, you start to see similar patterns and trends. So let's look, 1980s. So is this still contemporary relevant? Is there still relevance in what she has to say, or has society moved on so far since the 1920s, since the 1980s that it's different now? So she can't have any weighting. You can always do positive challenge. Okay, so we know she was Marjorie Goodwin, and although she was working in the 1980s, we can see that she was working definitely right up until 2012 in a highly acclaimed position within a university. So university professor, anthropologist, she's continued to work. That longevity that she's worked for such a long time adds to her weight, her credentials. So positive challenge, she's got a good kind of longevity, good set of credentials. We can trust her kind of expertise and her knowledge. However, are these findings of the directives taken from the 1980s still contemporarily relevant? Comparatively, we could say both Goodwin and Lakoff recognise the importance of how language behaviour is learnt as children and how it impacts on us as adults. However, Lakoff's interpretation was always that women opposite or work out of a place of deficit, of failing and shortcoming. And the question is, does Marjorie Goodwin say the same thing? So just if you had a few notes like that, just as I was speaking, I don't mind if you pause and rewind, the magic of YouTube, just start to kind of amplify your notes, add to them. So if there's anything that was missing, anything new, okay, and then we're going to just move on. So we're sticking with Marjorie Goodwin today, okay, but I did think at the end of yesterday's lesson, the idea of summarizing that methodology, it did look quite chunky. So what I've done is I've just tried to break it down a little bit into more specifics in terms of the how, the what's, and the evaluates, just to give us a kind of security in looking at this methodology. Now, quick little disclaimer, I know you guys have been set up by Miss Lockett to be thinking about your coursework. This is a lovely way to think about methodology for your own coursework. How are you going to do it? What are you going to do? And from an evaluative point of view, how's it going to work? So I don't mind if you listen and make your notes afterwards. I'm happy. I can't really see what you're doing if you make notes as I talk. But I just want to talk you through her methodology. Okay, obviously there's what's on the screen, but I might add a little bit. So what did Marjorie Goodwin do? So how did she come to these conclusions of aggravated and mitigated directives? So she used observation, and in particular observation of interaction with their peers. So in other words, she looked at children playing with other children and she observed them. Okay, now interaction is how they talk, converse, communicate with each other. So what did she notice? Well, the first thing she noticed is that children elaborate, and dispute. So they either play into or go against. So when we use these words elaborate and dispute here, what we're thinking about is that children can either elaborate behavior, so they can make more of it, or dispute or go against notions, ideas about their ethnicity, their social class and gender. So what I love about Goodwin is, although she's initially here as a gender theorist, we've just done a whole element of learning on social diversity. We could use Goodwin, so we've got like buy one, get one free, one theorist for the price of two topics, to say, interestingly, Goodwin also contributes to an understanding about social class, in that children will elaborate and dispute notions about their social class. Now, what I want us to think about, if I was going to put this into really simplistic terms, think like stereotypes. When a child elaborates a stereotype, they're playing up to it. When they're disputing it, they're going against it. So if there's a stereotype in gender, okay, and the stereotype is that girls love playing with dolls and pink things, okay? So a child that's elaborating that notion about gender is in the playground saying, oh, pink is my favorite color, and oh, look, and let's play mummies and daddies, and this is my doll. So when we talk about elaborating notions about gender, it's where we see children's behavior amplifying, exemplifying, following the expectation. However, what is really important is this second and, okay, this second idea. So Goodwin also identifies that children dispute notions about gender. So in other words, then, there will be some children that elaborate those gender norms, that gender appropriate behavior, and then suddenly not. So what we're saying is that you can have one girl talking about pink and playing with her dolls, then another girl comes along, and actually what she wants to do is she wants to play cowboys and Indians, and she wants to be a cowboy, and she's riding around on her horse, and pa-choom, 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 and she's shooting and playing that way. Now, it could be two different people within the group. One's elaborating, one's disputing, or it could be the same person, the same child, and they just transfer in certain contexts and certain games. Now, a personal anecdote here, ironically, talking on a hot summer's day, in my youth, so when I was still primary age, I think I must have been about 6. It was a really hot summer, and my mum, bless her, decided to cut off all my hair. She thought that would be the kindest thing to do on a hot summer, rather than have my long, beautiful, curly blonde hair that I did have blowing in the wind. Let's chop that off so Amy won't suffer from the heat. She also did it to my sister. Both of us suffered that year. But as soon as my hair got cut, every game I wanted to play with my friends, what role do you think I was cast in? So I was playing in an all-girl group. I had my best friends. Suddenly I was the prince, I was the boy, or I was the husband. So as we were role-playing and playing our games, they always, because we didn't have any boys in our friendship group, but you always needed a boy. You needed a prince, you needed a husband. Suddenly, with my haircut, I became the perfect representation of boyishness. So suddenly, I was having to be the boy. Now, that was me disputing, not necessarily consciously, that notion of gender appropriate kind of like game. I wasn't a girl, I wasn't pink. Although actually, I think my cape was pink because I was a prince with a cape. But this is what it means, that she noticed that children would elaborate or dispute notions about their gender. Now, interestingly, it also says here about ethnicity and social class. So in other words, you could have children elaborating and disputing through their play what society is trying to tell them it means to be a white middle class girl. It means you see children disputing or elaborating, so going against or playing into the idea of what it means to be a working class white girl. You would have disputes between people playing what it means to be a working class black girl or black male. So actually there is, through play, children working things out. And at the same time as well, they're either working together or they're violating or they're punishing people that violate norms.